Okay, there we go. Going live. 1, 2, 3. Excellent connection. Going. You're live, and hello, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And tonight, I got a great show for you all. We're going to be talking about the Salem Witch Trials. And with me, I got my guest hosts, Lucky Smith and Delabore Suchi. Thank you for coming. Thank you. It's going to be a great night. And I hope you're all, and you live in that area, Lucky. So this is going to be right up your alley. And Delabore, you know a bunch of this stuff about this too. So,
well, I live in Germany, and as a matter of fact, Germany had its own witch trials, except these happened a bit earlier under the Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, absolutely. It was, according to what I've read about all of this, is it started out in France and Germany and all those areas, and these persecuted Puritans, and England too, and these persecuted peoples came over here to get away from this stuff. And instead, whatever they did, they brought it with them.
Yeah.
Which is terrible, because it says in this book, which I'm going to read a little bit out of, that most of the people that were coming there were from Germany and Ireland, believe it or not.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, wow. Because they were exactly. That's why religious freedom was one of the first things that was enshrined in the Constitution, because they wanted to be free from like an official state-sponsored church. Because, like, for example, England had its own version of Christianity known as Anglicanism or whatever. So did each of these other countries, like the Church of Denmark, and stuff like that. Except that membership in that church was usually mandatory. And with mandatory membership meant mandatory church taxes. Like, for example, here in Germany, we still have what's known as the Kirchensteuer, which is a 9% tax above what you pay in regular income tax. Which and we're like, from what I know, what I've been told, we're like the only country on earth that still has a Kirchensteuer or church tax. Wow. Yeah, wow. That's why when I moved here in 2011, I was asked, like, what is your religion? And I was told, I responded, I told them that I'm an atheist, because, why should I willingly give 9% of my income to somebody who's got way more than enough money than they need?
Truth.
9%. Wow.
Yeah. You can look it up on Wikipedia.
Oh, I believe you, man. That's crazy.
That's awful.
That is, wow. I don't want to. I'm atheist too.
as a matter of fact, it's so bad that people didn't know this for so many years, and as people started finding out about it, thanks to the internet, and also the thing is, with the internet, most of the internet at its inception was in English, but as more and more information started coming out in German and other European languages, more people started becoming aware of this. So, for example, my grandmother, she's 99. When she was 98, she officially like withdrew her membership in the Catholic Church after being a member for 98 years. They went all out to try to get her to change her mind. They're like, well, that means you can't be buried in a Catholic cemetery, you can't have a funeral in a Catholic church. And she's like, I don't care. She's 99, but she's got a brain as sharp as a razor, and that's one of the reasons why she decided that she doesn't want to be in a Catholic church anymore. In addition to the fact that people found out about all the various goings on,
There's and the internet doesn't help out with that, because what you could keep quiet years ago, you can look up in 2 clicks and there you go, and you're going, holy crap, what am I supporting? So yeah, all of this started out, and you know what this reminds me of now? Everybody had, I don't know what everybody else out there in YouTube land knows about this, but to me, after reading this story and looking up this information, and like you said, it seems to me it's like California. And people are in California with these high taxes and wacky ways, and they go, oh my God, this is getting too crazy for me. I got to get out of here. And then they go somewhere else and they bring California with them. And then they're like, oh, I got crazy ideas. You got to do what I want. And
people like Joe Rogan and Elon Musk come to mind, because they're California. They were in California, but they moved to Texas, Austin specifically. And now they're changing that scene.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
Exactly Austin. Austin's become a little California. I've heard stories about that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Even
and that's exactly what happened back in the day. These Puritans and Christianity people, they moved to the colonies to set up their own and do their own things so they couldn't be persecuted, and so they could believe their own things and not pay those taxes and stuff. And then what did they do? They pretty much did the same thing to themselves.
Mhm.
And so I got this. This is the first book. Now I have two books here, and this one is and I'll show it to everybody. I love old books, everyone. So I go out and I spend a lot of money and I buy these really old books. So this is the history of the United States.
Mhm.
Oh, looks old. Looks at least from the
First-
1800s.
First settlement of the colonies in the period of the fifth census in 1836. And this book was published in 1842. So there you go. Okay, so I got some pages marked here, and this is where I'm going to start. And this is very interesting. It's going to sound a little boring here, but it gets really, we'll make some comments on this. We'll start out in the year of 1629, and fitted out for New England 5 ships, on board of which there embarked upwards of 300 passengers, amongst them who were several cinnamon non-conforming ministers. And there you go, non-conforming, as we talked about. On their arrival, they found the miserable remains of a small party that had left England the preceding year under the conduct of Mr. Endcott, who, prior to his incorporation of by royal character, had been appointed deputy governor. They were settled at a place called by the Indians Nanutuckeg. Nanutuckeg, Naunekeag. I hope I'm saying
Sounds like
that right.
Nantucket.
Yeah, to which had been given the scripture name of Salem. So now here's where the story of Salem starts. Immediately, the new colonists began the formation of their church without regarding the intentions of the king, but as accordance with the system which has since been distinguished by the name of independent. They elected by the imposition of hands, meaning the raising of hands, a pastor, a teacher, and an elder. And all who were admitted members of the church gave an account by the foundation of their own hope as Christians. They disencumbered by the public worship of every superfluous ceremony and reduced it to the lowest standard of Calvinistic simplicity. Yeah, they were getting simplistic, all right. You just watch. Much as we respect the noble spirit which enabled them to part with their native soil, by some held dearest than friends, relatives, or children, and by every genius bosom, preferred even to life itself, we must condemn the proceedings which ensued. Here's where things get strange. In the first moment, when they began to taste of Christian liberty themselves, they forgot that others had a right to the same enjoyment. Some of the colonists who had not immigrated through motives of religion retained a high veneration for the ritual of the English church. See, they were bringing that crap with them, and refused to join the colonist state establishment and assembled separately to worship. So now they're dividing Salem. But their objections were not suffered to pass unnoticed nor unpunished. Endcott called before him the 2 principal offenders, and through they were men of respectability, and amongst the number of original patronage or people who came, who expelled them from the colony. They expelled them from the colony and sent them home on the first ships returning to England. So you couldn't even move to a different city. You sent you back to England. Holy crap, you know. He had an inquisitional something to exercise some apology, or at least palliation might be framed. More interesting and painful consequences, however, not long afterward resulted. The very much who had commenced the violation of the Christian duties lived to see their own descendants excluded from the church communion, to behold their grandchildren, the smiling infants of the breast, denied the sacred rite of baptism. Oh my gosh, they're like,
Wow.
cutting the throats of their own.
Easy.
Yeah, these people were, this is way before, this is in 1730 something, and they got 30 more years, 60 more years to go. The land, the parent country was exacted religious conformity with increasing rigor, and the desire of immigration grew promotionally. And several who now felt indignant at those measures were persons of greater opulence and of higher rank, and any who had hitherto settled in England. By their influence, an important alteration was effected. The company consented that the government of the colony should be transferred to America and vested exclusively in those members who should reside there. Okay, I'm just now this guy here comes in. In the general court, John Winthrop was appointed governor, and Thomas Dooley deputy governor, and 18 assistants, of whom the body of the freemen were entrusted in the corporate rights of the company. In the course of ensuing year, 1,500 persons sailed from Massachusetts, among whom them were distinguished families, some of easy, several, and affiliate circumstances. On the arrival of a number, they were so dissatisfied with the situation of Salem that they removed and settled in various places around the bay, founded Boston and Charleston and Dorchester and Roxborough. Do you know any of those towns, Lucky?
Yeah. They're
So those are still towns?
oh yeah, they're still towns. Roxborough might be Roxbury now, but besides that, they're all the same. They're all, those cities are there.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Dorchester.
Dorchester's a suburb of Boston. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, there
they're all kind of like, Roxbury, Dorchester. The other one, they're all Boston. They're the suburbs of Boston.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Well, and that's the thing too, is these so they hated Salem so much they moved out. Now you remember there's 1,500 of them, so there was a lot of them that moved to settle these other towns and towns, since they became of considerable importance. Boston was named through respect to Mr. Cotton, after a town in Lincolnshire, of which before his arrival to England he had been minister. So Boston was named after Mr. Cotton. Wow. Did you know that?
No.
No.
The extension of these settlements was aided by the sudden decrease of the natives. The smallpox induction by the English had carried off the Indian race in so great multitudes that the whole tribe disappeared, and thus left vacant the country in which they might remain without disturbance. The first general court was held in Charleston on board a ship, Umbrella. In the meeting, they ventured to derive from the character in a matter of great moment a deviation which strongly affected the future operations of the colony. The law was passed declaring that none should be admitted as freemen or be entitled to any share in the government or even to serve as jurymen, except those who had been received as members of the church. Well, that's a way to get them witches, right? By which measure, every person whose mind was not a particular structure, accidentally impressed with particular ideas, was at once cast out of society and stripped of his civic rights. Wow. Either you think like us or you're out.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. You wouldn't want to say you're atheist there. Holy cow.
Or anti-vaxxer, no?
Yes, any of that stuff.
Or Buddhist.
Yeah, I mean, that little town of Massachusetts there, that whole little section was by the next train. They still religious over there? Is it still like that?
Well, it's pretty industrial, I guess. Like Lynn, Massachusetts is pretty industrial.
Mhm.
And that's like right next to Salem.
Yeah,
Huh, interesting.
it depends. There are pockets of it. Very Catholic. There's a lot of Irish Catholics around Boston and around the area.
Well, it's just interesting to see if they're, really, they're church on every corner kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
Um,
there are. Yes, I can actually walk a mile in any direction and hit a church, and there's at least maybe 7 or 8 churches where I live, and there's plenty of churches.
Wow. Okay. Well, anyway, the public was, but the next transaction was more purelic than injurious. Rather than subject of amusement and matter of alarm, the minister in Salem named Roger Williams, having conceived an aversion to a cross of St. George, a symbol of the standard of England. See, this is where they already started. It's so easy once you read this to see how the witch trials could have started easily. So this William Rogers, having conceived an aversion to the cross of St. George, a symbol of the standard of England, declaimed against it with so much vigilance as a relic of superstition and idolatry, I can't say that word, which ought not to be retained amongst a people of so sanctified and pure, then idyllic, in a transport of zeal, cut out of the cross from the ensign displayed before the governor's gate. The frivolous matter interested and divided the colony. Here they are, divided already. Some of the milita were now unwilling to follow a standard in which there was a cross, lest they should not or do honor to an idol. Others refused to serve under the multituded banner, lest they should be subjected to having renounced their allegiance to the crown of England. The contest was at length ended by a compromise. The cross was retained in the ensigns of the fort and vessels, but erased from the colors of the milita. The restless desperation of William had caused his banishment from Salem, a circumstance to which is owing the foundation of another state to go great, the attachment of his haters and accompanying him into his exile. They directed their march towards the south and purchased some land from the native, a considerable tract of land to which their leader gave the name Providence. And 2 years afterwards, William Coddington, a wealthy merchant of Boston, having 76 others been banished from Massachusetts for favoring the religious doctrines of the celebrated Anne Hutchinson. I've heard of that name, Anne Hutchinson before, and I don't know where it's from. I got to look that up. And holding not less than 80 erroneous opinions purchased from the Indians and Tickanack, a fertile land in Nagasat Bay, and named it Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, there you go. After the island of Rhodes, under which the title previous settlement by William is now included. And that's about all it goes into, so these, and then it goes on to other things about the Dutch and stuff. So it kind of ends there with the Salem thing. So it sets the mood for Salem, telling you that they was already divided. They were bringing people over, their same ideas. I mean, can you imagine? You have a cross of St. George. That's a no-no. We got to get rid of.
Yeah.
But aren't you God-believing Christian people kind of thing? And if you don't swear allegiance to the Christianity, you're out too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got a kick out of all of that.
It's exactly like I always say. Religion basically functions by taking a group of people, separating them from the rest of society, and telling them that they're better than the other people.
And that's exactly what happened.
It's a typical divide and conquer scheme. And it's designed to weaken the general population by instilling divisions, where the founding fathers of the United States were really wise when they had that freedom of religion clause and as part of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, except that what they weren't counting on would be all these other religions other than Christian ones that would eventually wind up emigrating into the United States, like Buddhism or others.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to say hi to everybody in the chat. We got a lot of people in here. We got 17 people watching. We got Big Al, who's in Tennessee. I think he's going to Nashville tomorrow. Paul from Newcastle, Elderberry, Joe Sapien has come to join us tonight, and Julie Stowe, she's heading back to do some painting. Pa Joe is in the house, and Isby, much favor to you, Isby, and Max Vision from a remote viewing, who will have a show tonight about 10 o'clock right after this one. Jill Jarrett's in the house. She come to visit, and Gaza Cav all the way from Australia. Thank you for coming. And Slightly Slanted Sleuth from the Truth. Steve from all the way from Minnesota. Hello, and thank you for coming. And I hope I didn't miss anybody. Oh, Crystal Clear was one of the first people in the house, and Delaney Pearl Jones. And hopefully I got to get a hold of Delaney tomorrow. And Delaney, if you're in the house, I'm going to be sending you a link. We can maybe do some card reading if you're up and at it. Okay, now back to the Salem thing. Now we got the stage set. The place is divided. There's Christian people. You swear an alliance or you're out of there. And they don't just ship you out the door, but back to England. And now I know why they could do what they did, is because they introduced smallpox, killed off all the Indians, took their land. What an easy way. Genocide by the hands of biological weapons.
The fact that they even admit to doing this in the book is pretty revealing.
Yeah. See, now all the stuff, I do a lot of research on this stuff, but the stuff that you see now is not, it's tweaked just a little bit. So the story's there, but they don't tell you the whole thing.
It's sanitized.
Yes, that's it.
To make it look nice.
Yeah, it's totally sanitized. And a lot of these apologists would say, well, they gave them the smallpox unintentionally, that this was like a Western disease that the Indians were not immune to. But it's obvious that they knew exactly what they were doing. Yes,
they knew exactly. And they bought Rhode Island from the Indians for probably a few beads and trinkets.
Well, just like they bought Manhattan Island for $24, or the equivalent of $24 in trinkets or what have you. Yeah.
Oh, and it's terrible. It is. It's really terrible. Okay, now I'm going to screen share. You guys just pipe in whenever you see something or hear something. Don't worry. Okay, this is what I found off the internet. And we're going to put this up and go through a little bit of this. This is the sanitized version of Salem. And of course, this all happened in 1692. I'm going to just skim over some of this. It was the daughters of this Samuel Paris. He was the minister in Salem Village. Now, this is 60 years after we just got done reading about the division. And I don't think it got any better. Okay. So his daughters, they were exhibiting strange signs of doing, contortions with their body and things like that. During this time, they hung 19 men and women, and an additional one passed to death. Several others died in prison. They locked everybody up. 150 people were locked in prison. I assume many more, and they got out at certain times.
But that whole pressing to death,
Yes.
I'm not sure you know what that was. That was if you refused to plead, you were pressed into a plea, which literally meant that they would put a big wooden board over you and then place stones until they got you to either plead guilty or not guilty. And if you didn't plead and they put enough stones on you, well, you were pressed to death. That's what that means.
Yeah. I have a picture of that pressing to death, so we can actually see this, because I was smart and got all this stuff. I just got to see it. These tiny little pictures here. I think this is the pressing to death one. Nope, that ain't the pressing to death one. I got a pressing to death one. There's a hanging one.
Well, all I know is that his last words were more stones. He refused to give in. Said just more stones.
More stones.
That was his last words. He didn't care.
In other words, he was a badass of the 1600s.
They burned
I'm not
some of them.
confessing.
They burned some of them. Where is the guy with the stone?
Well, no, Salem, they didn't burn anyone in Salem. They burned them in
Oh.
Europe, but not in America.
Oh, okay. Well, then
We're
we
more
didn't worry about
civilized here.
that.
We just put stones on you and hung you, but we didn't burn you.
Yeah, exactly. Shoot, I didn't take one either. Where is it? That's the burning. I got a bunch. This is where everything goes awry because oh no, this was a handcuff one. I got a stone one here somewhere and I can't find it. There's the Indian lady. Oh, huh. Well, maybe I don't have the stone one. I swear to gosh, I did the stone one too. Huh. Oh well, my bad. I thought I had the stone one here somewhere. I'll find it when I least expect it. Maybe that was, nope, that ain't a stone. Oh well, I guess that's so much for that. Anyway, back to the story. This is where things go badly because when I looked up Salem, this is the stuff I found. Burnings, there was a few of these things, but a lot of it was showing people in shackles and hanging and witches all over the place. And I thought, oh my God. So basically, Samuel Parris, his daughters were acting up. Their maid or their house woman, this tubular, what'd you call her, Lucky? What was it?
Tituba was a slave.
Tituba. Yeah.
She wasn't a maid, she was a slave.
And she confessed to being a witch and telling the kids of witchcraft stuff. And of course
she came from the islands, which means from the Caribbean, which means she was most likely a practitioner of Santeria.
Yes.
Or what we would call today voodoo.
Yeah, it was a more primitive version, but yes, there's no question about it that she did practice some rites and she had some stories and she admitted to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she did. And
she technically was the only real, what they could classify as a witch, and she survived the whole thing. So
yeah, because
maybe she was a witch. Maybe she did put a cast over her. She survived it, but
she was the first one to confess to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kept her around to be to point people out. So they used her, and even though she confessed, they used her to point people out, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to point people out.
I think it's worse than that, Robert, because she was a slave. She wasn't human to them. She was a property. And so that's one thing, is that she survived because of her station. It's terrible, but it got her out of it, I guess. It's a double-edged sword. She was not treated like a human, but she survived the whole fiasco.
Well, I think after reading about all of this, they were out for certain people, and
they wanted their land. They wanted their land. They wanted their property.
Yes, because at the end they pointed, with certain people they were pointing out. Okay, and so people with the prison were filled with 150 men and women from towns surrounding Salem. Their names have been cried out by tormented young girls in their cause of pain. Well, you know what? How could young girls see this? What don't make any sense. So how could a young girl speak out names of people from other towns or from around the surrounding village? How often do your kids get out and meet all the townspeople? They don't. Somebody was feeding them names.
Well, worse, they could have just been crying out anything at all, and it could have been, "Oh, that sounds like this. Do you mean this?" And the girl says, "Yes, that's the name." Yes, they were all. And the thing was, as I read in this book, when the fame came to them and they realized they were important, they started souping it up and acting off even more. So now here we're at the sanitized version. I'm going to get to the real good version soon. In June, this all started in June. They made a court. They sat in Salem to hear the cases of witchcraft. They were proceeded. They set up a judge. What happened is what I read, and I'll go into this a little bit more, but the guys who were supposed to be the judge went out of town and they appointed all these new judges and things on the spur of the moment. They set up an illegal court, an illegal jury. They pointed people out and said, here.
So it was basically like a posse.
Yeah. And they were out to get, but each one of them. Now I had a friend who says, hey, the townspeople were running around and accusing all these people and they were burning, and there was probably a bunch of others burned at the stake or killed or hanged or whatever. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think so. This was meticulated, and whoever was doing it used the government and the legal system to get their enemies and point out certain people. And so anyway, William Stoughton, a court was made up of magistrates and jurors to first be tried by the Bridget Bishop of Salem, who was found guilty and was hanged on June 10th. The bishop, Bridget Bishop. Okay. She was one of 13 women, 5 men of all stations of life following her to the gallows on 3 successive hanging days before the court was disbanded by Governor Phillips in October of that year. The Superior Court of formed to replace the witchcraft court. Yeah, they formed their own witchcraft court. There you go. Did not allow spectacle evidence.
Spectral evidence. That was
basically,
like I said before the show, like evidence as in, I had a dream where I saw so and so desecrating the holy host or whatever.
Oh yeah. See, they were accused of using invisible shapes or things to torture their victims, had sealed the fates of those tried by the court of Oyster and Termer. The court released those awaiting trial and pardoned those awaiting execution. In effect, Salem Witch Trials were over. Okay, so they skipped over so much of this stuff because in the book there, this went on and on and on. And when the bigwigs, heard about this in the Superior Court, they sent men down like Big Dad and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing? You're doing witch trials. This is crazy." Because they were just like on their own and everybody was pointing at everybody. And the thing was, is the more people that were getting pointed, and once they started confessing, then they started acting crazy, and people were coming from towns all around to see the spectacle. It was quite the ordeal. The Salem residents in 1692, they think there was a fungus. I don't know if it was a fungus or something so much, but the causes such as delusions, vomiting, and muscle spasms. And it could be a fungus from rye, the rye and the wheat and other cereals, which I'm sure they were eating a lot of. But why only that town, and why only so few people? Okay. His daughter, Elizabeth Betty Paris, was 11 years old. She was a daughter of Samuel Paris, the minister of all people. And after a local doctor, William Riggs, diagnosed bewitchment. See, now you get the doctor and he says, "Oh, it's bewitchment." Well, now you got to point to a witch, of course. And okay, so the younger girls in the community began exhibiting similar symptoms, including Ann Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Elizabeth Hubbard, Mary Wilcock, and Mary Warden. In late February, arrest warrants were issued for the Paris Caribbean slave Tibula. As I said that right? Good. Tituba. I don't know why I call it Tibula.
It's
Tituba.
fine.
Okay, along the other 2 women, the homeless beggar Sarah Good and the poor elderly Sarah Osborne, whom the girls accused of bewitching them. Yeah.
Well, see, a lot of this could have had like an avalanche effect in the sense of somebody got sick from something legitimate, and then mass hysteria ensued because people didn't have access to the information, and a lot of these symptoms could have just been psychosomatic. And, uncontrollable outbursts of screaming, that could be anything. That could be epilepsy, that could be Tourette's syndrome, that could be even schizophrenia. It could literally be anything.
And then they started pointing out people. Look at the Sarah Good. She was beggar, a homeless person. I mean, come on. And all these old people. Well, you're old. You must look like a witch, In January 1697, the Massachusetts General Clerk declared a day of fasting. So once they figured out this was all bad, they went to the big court and they were like, "Oh my gosh, sorry, we shouldn't have done that." They provided restitution to their heirs. It's a painful legacy for, all.
But it's shocking that even like the local physician signed off on this this diagnosis of bewitchment. It's like, okay, what kind of a doctor was this, and where did he get his degree? And did they teach him about bewitchment at the university that he studied at, or Well, what's the deal?
Well, they were all Christians. I mean, I suppose everything was the devil. If it wasn't God, it had to be the devil, and then you must be possessed. And I mean, if they can find a cross offensive, like I said, that's why when I read that older book, it just started making everything make sense. If they could find a cross of St. George offensive to the point where it divides the community and they have to remove it, gosh darn, if that lady says, I'm feeling funny, it must be bewitchment.
Well, it looks like Tituba actually turned state's evidence, as we would call it, because she was found guilty, so she turned state's evidence and started informing on other people, random people, probably.
Yeah, well, and that's what it says here. The accused witches were brought before the magistrates, Corwin and Hawthorne, and questioned. And as their accusers appeared in the courtroom in a grand display of spasms and contortions, screaming and withering, through Good and Osborne denied their guilt. Tibula confessed, likely seeking to save herself from certain conviction by acting as an informer. She claimed that there were other witches acting alongside her in the service of the devil against the Puritans. I suppose that's all she had to say, and everybody went wacko. As hysteria spread through the community and beyond into the rest of Massachusetts, a number of others were accused, including Martha Corey, Rebecca Nurse, both regarded as upstanding members of the church and community, and a 4-year-old daughter of Sarah Good. Now, can you imagine a 4-year-old practicing witch stuff? Come on. Okay, like Tibula served accused Tituba. Why is he saying that? Tituba served accused witches, confessed, and named still others. And so she's naming people too to keep. I suppose she just kept naming names and keep her out of jail. We're going to put you to death. I know the guy down there.
Yeah.
Well, it's easier to say that she named names than they gave her the names to state. So
exactly,
we don't know exactly what happened.
But it's also a tactic that some of these like modern day serial killers used that were sentenced to death, and he confesses to like more serial killings just to keep the interest in the case going and delay his execution. That's all. Yep.
So these people, in order to establishment, they set up a court. It was an illegal court. Judges, including Hawthorne, Samuel and Sewell, and William Stowe, these same guys, the court handed down the first convictions against Bridget Bishop on the June 2nd, and she was hanged 8 days later on what would become known as Gallows Hill in Salem Town. 5 more people were hanged that July, 5 in August, and 8 more in September. In addition, 7 others accused witches died in jail, while elderly Gills Corey, Martha's husband, was pressed to death by stones after he refused to enter a plea in his arraignment. Wow. So, so he didn't say it, and he was just pressed to death by stone. That's got to be horrible.
No, he said more stones. That is the most ballsy move to say, I'm not confessing, and you might as well just keep on going because I'm not saying anything. That's just...
Yeah, he was a badass, true badass.
Truly.
Yeah. And then, then it's another minister, Cotton Mather, who was in on it, had warned of the dubious value of spectral evidence or testimony about the dreams or visions. His concerns went largely unheeded during the Salem Witch Trials and Police Matters. President of Harvard College and Cotton's father later joined his son in urging that the standards of evidence for witchcraft must be equal to those for any other crime, and concluding that it would be better than that 10 suspected witches may escape than one innocent person be condemned.
The worst part about it is that even in the civilized world, I just remembered that it was only until 1967 in England that they actually repealed the laws against witchcraft that basically decriminalized quote unquote witchcraft, whatever that means.
It's not a criminal crime anymore. Boy,
yeah. Well, it seems, they say that, we're supposed to learn from history, but it looks like the colonists did not learn from history, because this is exactly what happened in Europe in the 13th and 14th century was full of the Spanish Inquisition, mass burnings, mass hangings, and trials for witchcraft. Again, that were also in many cases based on spectral evidence and
Mhm.
other things like birthmarks or various deformities that people had.
Exactly. Here's a picture of Tibula and the three children. Uh, here they're tying them up. Oh, see, they're going to burn them. But see, this is why I think people get the wrong ideas, because when I looked up Salem, this is the pictures I found. Burn them at the stake. And they got stuff set up, I suppose, for stones and stuff. This is in Salem.
Yes.
And dunking them in the water. Tell us you're a witch. We're dunking the water.
Yeah, that was so-called trial by ordeal, where basically if you drowned, you were innocent, but if you didn't drown, you were a witch. So, kind of defeats the purpose.
Yep. Here's Elizabeth Howell. They got gravestones there too.
Yeah, this is actually just stones for where their graves could be. They don't know where they're buried.
Oh.
This is all a guess. This was only just a tribute.
Okay.
They don't actually know where Gallows Hill was even. They think they know, but
really,
they don't know where the bodies are. They don't know where the Gallows Hill is. They don't even know where Salem originally was. The Salem that we have right now was actually a kind of a suburb. It's crazy because no one wanted to live there because of the mess. There's a whole story after the fact.
Wow.
Nobody wants to live there. That reminds me, in my own country, where we had Theresienstadt. Well, Theresienstadt is still around, but nobody wants to live there. You go there, it's literally a ghost town.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
there are people living there now, but it's not called Salem. It's called, I think it's Danvers. I mean, it's
Danvers,
well,
yeah.
Lynn, Massachusetts is right next to it, so it could be.
Yeah, it could be Lynn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That possibly I've forgotten, but I do know that talking to someone like, yeah, this is not where it happened. It happened. They don't exactly know where it was.
Yep.
I think it was in the Witch Museum. I heard that story. We're talking to someone about it, one of the curators.
And it's also interesting that when I was researching this back in the late 90s, it's amazing how many different types of the diversity of information that you get, because some people say, well, only 13 people died, and then some people say, well, it was like hundreds of people died, and then you find out from one source that they were all hanged, and in some cases they say, oh, well, most of them were burned alive. So it's with that being so far in the past, it's difficult to say what really happened over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't even want to find out, especially if it was like their grandfather that was involved or something. They would try to cover that up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. Exactly. Okay, so now I got my cool old book. I'll find this in here, and we're going to start. I got my little marker here. And so you want to hear the story from as far back as they got it here. Not my enemy who I'm one of the flock. Oh, where am I going to start here? Modern times, the crowd. Oh, okay. I'm going to start here. It must remark that this is going to be funny because some of their words don't. It was really hard. I had to read this like 4 or 5 times just to get this straight. Must be remarked that in the modern times, it's kind of funny when this is 1830s. Remarked in modern times that the cry of witchcraft has been raised by the priesthood rarely, I think never except when free injury was advancing. Many a commission was empowered to punish alike harshly and witchcraft. The bold inquiry sometimes burned as a wizard and sometimes insurgent against the established faith. In France, where there were mostly heretics, there were most condemnations for witchcraft. Rebellion, it was said, is as the sin of witchcraft. And Cotton Mather, in his discourse, did but repeat the old tale. Rebellion is akin the trouble of us all. And that's that same guy, Cotton Mather. He was a minister there, and he did the same thing as in France. The Salem village, now Danvers, had been there between Samuel Parris, the minister, and part of his people, a strife so bitter that it had even attracted the attention of the general court. The delusion of witchcraft had been given opportunities of terrible vengeance in the family of Samuel Parris, his daughter, a child of 9 years, and his niece, a girl of less than 12, began to have strange caprices. I don't know why it says caprices, but he that will read Cotton Mather's book of memorable providences may read part of that, what the children suffered. And Tibula, I think I said that right.
Tituba.
Tituba, I don't know why I get that wrong. Tituba, an Indian female servant who was practiced some wild incantations, being betrayed by her husband, was scored by Paris, her master, into confessing herself a witch. The ministers of the neighborhood held at the afflicted house a day of fasting and prayer. They're always fasting and praying, I swear. And the little children became most conspicuous personages of Salem. Of a sudden opportunity of fame, you notice how they said opportunity of fame, of which the love is not the exclusive infirmity of noble minds, was placed within the reach of persons of the corset mold, and an habitation of notoriety recruited the little company of the possessed. There existed no motive to hang oh God, I said it wrong.
Tituba.
I can't. Tituba. She was saved as a living witness to the reality of witchcraft. And Sarah Good, a poor woman of melancholic temperament, was the first person selected for accusation. Cotton Mather, who had placed witches among the poor and vile and the ragged beggars upon the earth, and had staked his own reputation or veracity on the reality of witchcraft, prayed for a good issue. As the affair proceeded and the accounts of the witnesses appeared as if taken from his own writings, his boundless vanity gloried in the assault of the evil angels upon the country as a particular defiance unto himself. Yet the delusions, but for Paris would have languished of his own niece, the girl of 11 years of age. He demanded the names of the devil's instruments, who bewitched the band of the afflicted, and then became at once informer and witness. In those days there was no persecuting officer, and Paris was hand to question his Indian servants and others, himself prompting the answers and acting as recorder to the magistrates. The recollection of the old. So he's doing it all. He's prompting him. It's telling how he's doing this.
Yeah, it was basically the same thing as you see in modern day, where some people try to become celebrities for whatever reason, whether it's fame or notoriety. It doesn't matter as long as they're famous. And it seems like this was an attempt by some people just to get into the limelight for whatever reason.
Well, yeah,
And
exactly.
it seems like they used like a natural catastrophe, which could have been ergot poisoning, as was mentioned before, because ergot poisoning does happen to certain types of grain, and it's a mold or smut, as they call it.
Yep.
That grows on grain under some circumstances, and it causes symptoms like hallucinations, convulsions, uncontrollable body movements, and stuff like that. And as a matter of fact, LSD is actually made from ergot.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's the reason why in Europe for many centuries now, they centralized the distribution of all the wheat, where the rationale was if it got mixed up with if some of this wheat was infected and they didn't know it, and it got mixed up with some of the general population of wheat that was harvested, then the effects wouldn't be as drastic, and they'd still do that to this day for that purpose.
Wow. Yeah, but see, and I agree with that. And it might have affected the kids a little bit more because they're young.
Yeah,
and
that's also the explanation for phenomena that we've observed in Europe, like St. Vitus's dance, where you had entire dancing villages where people just couldn't stop dancing, where they were under the influence of a psychedelic drug. Yet when they saw one person dancing, it was like a collective hysteria thing added into that made everybody else want to dance. Or there are also like fits of laughter that afflicted certain villages where some people actually died of laughter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. But I think the kids, once they got this and thing. They just loved the limelight,
Oh, yeah.
too. Besides being on the drugs, they were just souping this up.
Mhm.
So this Cotton Mather, he was appointed with the Royal Council and was installed into office. The triumph of Cotton Mather was perfect. Immediately, a court of oyster and termer was instituted by ordinance, and Stoughton appointed by the governor and a council of his chief judges. By the 2nd of June, the court was in session at Salem, making the first experiment. They say experiment on Bridget Bishop, a poor and friendless old woman. Experiment. Let's experiment on her, see if we can convict her and hang her. Like it's fun or something. The fact that witchcraft was assumed as notorious to fix it on a prisoner. Samuel Paris, who examined her before, remember, he's a minister, examined her before commitment, was a principal witness to her power of inflicting torture. He had seen it exercise. Delivering Hobbs had been, or Deliverance Hobbs, another guy, had been whipped with iron rods. Oh my God, by her, and the specter of neighbors who had quarreled with her, and were willing to lay their little ills to her charge. The poor creature had a preternatural excrescence in her flesh. She gave a look towards the great spacious meeting house of Salem in Cotton Mather, who records this, and immediately a demon, invisibly entering the house, tore down a part of it. She was a witch by the rules of precedence, and Kibble and Sir Matthew Hale of Perkins and Bernard Baxter and Cotton Mather, and on the 10th of June, protesting her innocence, was hanged. She was hanged. Of the magistrates at the time, not one held office by the suffrage of the people, and the tribunal, essentially despotic in its origin as it is in character, had no sanction but to extraordinary and an illegal commission. And Stoughton, the chief judge of the partisan Andros, had been rejected by the people of Massachusetts. So they're getting all these guys who are unwanted, making an illegal court. Just
Yeah,
so,
it was a kangaroo court.
Yes.
For want of a better word. Yeah.
That's
I
exactly
like
what it
that.
was.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the elites went along with this because this served as a convenient scapegoat for their own shortcomings under certain circumstances.
Exactly.
Like let's say there was some money missing or whatever, they could say, oh, well, the witch did it, obviously.
Well, obviously they were out to get somebody, and they picked this old woman. She was an old poor woman living on the street, and this Bridget Bishop, and they used her, and it says they used her as an experiment to see if they could get it done. And if they did,
those experiments were the trials by ordeal, which was either the dunking, or they had like other weird ones where they would put like a mass of rice into their mouth, and if it came out wet, then they were guilty, and if it came out dry, they were also guilty, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And then it goes on, and something about the people from Massachusetts, rejected by the people of Massachusetts, this guy did. But the responsibility of the tragedy, far from attaching to the people of the colony, rests with the very few hardy 5 or 6, in whose hands the transition state of the government left for a season. So the real government left for a whole season, unlimited influence onto the interior of the colony. The delusion did not spread at all. The House of Representatives, which assembled in 1692 June, was busy with its griefs at the abridgment of the old colonial liberties. Increase. Mather, the agent, was heard in his own defiance, and at the last bond, the speaker, in the same name of the House, tardily and languagely thanked him for his faithful and unwearied excursions. No recompense was voted. I seek not yours, but you, said Increase Mather. I am willing to wait for recompense in another world. And in the general court, after prolonging the validity of the old laws, adjourned to October. But Phillips and his council had not looked into the general court for directions. They turned their ministries of Boston and Charleston, and from them, by the hands of Cotton Mather, they received gratitude from their solicitous endeavors to defeat the abominable witchcrafts. The prayer that the discovery may be perfect, a caution against haste and spectral evidence, a hint to affront the devil and to give him the lie by condemning none on his testimony alone. While the dreadful advice is added, we recommended the speedy and victorious prosecution of such as have rendered themselves obnoxious. The obedient court at its next session condemned 5 women, all of blameless lives, all declaring their innocence. 4 were convicted easily enough. Rebecca Nurse was the first acquitted. The honored court was pleased to object against the verdict, and as she had said of the confessing witness, they used to come among us, meaning they had been prisoners together. Stoughton interrupted the words of the witch festival. The jury withdrew and could not yet agree, but as the prisoner, who was hard of hearing and full of grief, made no explanation, and they no longer refused to find her guilty. Hardly was the verdict rendered before the foreman made a statement of the ground on her condemnation and sent her declaration to the court. In reply, the governor, who himself was not unmerciful, saw no cause to grant reprieve, but Paris had preached against Rebecca Nurse and prayed against her. He induced the afflicted to witness against her and had caused her sisters to be imprisoned. So now her and her sisters are being imprisoned. She's acquitted. She's going to leave. And so she must perish. This is what Parrish is saying. She must perish, or the delusion was unveiled, and the governor recalled the reprieve. On the next communion day, she was taken in chains to the meeting house to be formally excommunicated by Noyes, her minister, and this is another minister, and was hanged with the rest. You are a witch. You know you are, said Noyes to Sarah Good, urging a confession. You are a liar, she replied. The poor woman, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink. Oh my goodness. So, it's all this family, the sisters, the lady, and no matter if you're guilty or not, you could be innocent, and yet the priest or the minister says you're guilty. He gets all the people, riles them at church, and you're guilty, and let's hang her.
And yeah, in that last case, that reminds me of a cover-up. It just smells of cover-up. Like they didn't want her, coming clean about the other prisoners being innocent as well. I mean, because it would have cast into doubt like the whole court that sentenced them in the first place. That's why they had to legitimize the court, quote unquote, by executing her. So that's what it smells like to me. And we saw something very similar to that about 300 years later with the so-called satanic panic, where instead of using spectral evidence, they were using evidence extracted under hypnosis from children. Nonetheless, I mean, so how is the state of hypnosis different from the dreaming state? You can literally make anybody say anything under hypnosis.
That you can, and then the thing is they're getting these children that might have that delusional stuff going on, and they're pointing out these people. They're giving them names to say, and it's all the adult people that are going to the court being called witches. None of them were having these afflictions, not yet anyway.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to get these people to confess, and it seems like the people that didn't confess, they were getting hanged. But if you did the confession, not so much. And so here it goes on with this. Confessions rose as importance. Some not afflicted before confession were so presently after it. The jails were filled, for fresh accusations were needed to confirm confessions. This was like a building thing. Like, if I call you a witch, then, you're going to jail. I don't like you. You're my neighbor, but you threw your garbage on my lawn. He's a witch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know.
And it's no different than like, under the Patriot Act, you could make the same accusation except substitute the word for witch, terrorist.
Yeah.
You're a terrorist.
Exactly. So the jails were filled, and some by these accusations. And so once these people were accused, they confessed, and then they started having all these conniption fits too. Now I think they were putting on an act. They had to
Sure. Yeah.
Some by these accusations of others. I quote, the cautions apologistic hail, hope to gain time and get favor from the rulers. They're looking for favor. Yes, from the rulers. Some of the inferior sort of people did ill offices by promising favor. So they're giving things. Favor is they're promising money, land, things like that, thereby more than they had ground to engage. Some under these temptations regarded not as they should what became of others. So they didn't care what happened to the other people, just as long as they got out. So so that they could thereby serve their own turns. I love this. This book is so hard to read, people.
I know, but if you rewrote that in modern language, you would have a lot of terms in there, like turning state's evidence,
Yes,
or entrapment. I'm sure a lot of that went on.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was. And then here, I'll give you money, you let me out. I'll just say I'm a witch, and then the priest will cast the demon out of me. I'll be good. Right?
Yeah.
Oh my God. The confessions were contradictory. If witnesses uttered apparent falsehoods, oh God, here we go. Apparent falsehoods, the judges would say, take away their memory and impose on their brains. And who now would dare to be skeptical? Who would disbelieve confessors? Besides, there were other evidences. Call out, spot was the mark of the devil. Did age or amazement refuse to shed tears? Were threats after a quarrel followed by the death of cattle or other harm? Did an error occur in repeating the Lord's Prayer? Oh my gosh, I missed a word. I'm going to be a witch.
Yeah.
Were deeds of great physical strength performed? These were all signs of witchcraft. In some instances, the phenomena of somnambulism would appear to have been exhibited.
Somnambulism, that's sleepwalking.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering what that was. And I'm thinking, I got to look this up, but I haven't had time. Sleepwalking, oh boy, would appear to have been exhibited, and the afflicted, out of their fits, knew nothing of what they did or said in them. Again, on a new session, 6 are arraigned and all convicted. John Willard had an officer been employed. Now, this is John Willard. He was an officer employed to arrest the suspected witches. Perceiving the hypocrisy, he declined the service, which seems natural. I'm the officer. I can't go arrest him for being a witch.
Yeah.
Oh, he declined the service. Now listen to this. The afflicted immediately denounced him, and he was seized, convicted, and hanged.
he was a man of conscience, and
yes.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. This, like I said, when I'm reading this, I'm like, it's like, if you don't do what we say, if you don't think these are witches, you're hanging too. You must be a witch. At the trial of George Burroughs, the bewitched persons pretended to be dumb. Who hinders these witnesses, said Stoughton, from giving their testimonies? I suppose the devil, answered Burroughs. How come the devil? Resorted the chief judge. So loath to have any testimony bore against you. And the question was effective. Besides, he had given proof of great, if not preternatural muscular strength. Cotton Mather called the evidence enough, and the jury gave the verdict of guilty. So if you had extra strength that day, you could be a witch and get hanged.
Oh,
You know?
well,
Oh my God.
it's true that there weren't a whole lot of 16th century bodybuilders.
No,
So
but
if
what do
you
they?
were one back in those days, that was pretty unusual, I guess.
Yeah, you must be a witch then.
Yeah.
John Proctor, who foresaw his doom and knew of whom the danger came, sent an earnest petition not to the governor and council, but to Cotton Mather and the ministers. Among the witnesses against him were some who had made no confessions till after torture. They have already undone us in our estates, and this will not serve their turns without our innocent blood. And he begs for a trial in Boston. That was a smart move, or at least for a change of magistrates. His entreaties were vain, and also his prayers after condemnation for the respite. Among the witnesses against Martha Carey, the mother saw her own children, her two sons refused to perjure themselves till they had been tied neck and heels so long that the blood was ready to gush from them. Can you imagine that? Oh my God. The confession of her daughter, a child of 7 years old, is still preserved. The age Jacobs was condemned in part by the evidence of Margaret Jacobs, his granddaughter. Through the magistrates threatening and my own vile heart, thus she wrote to her father, I have confessed things contrary to my conscience and knowledge, but oh, the terrors of a wounded conscience, who can bear? And she confessed the whole truth before the magistrates. The magistrates refused their belief, and confining her for trial, proceeded to hang her grandfather. The 5 were condemned on the 3rd and hanged on the 19th of August. Pregnancy reprieved Elizabeth Proctor. So she was pregnant, so they didn't hang her. To hang a minister as a witch is a novelty, but Burroughs denied absolutely there was or could be such a thing as witchcraft in the current sense. So he's denying that there's no witchcraft and they're going to hang him. This opinion wounded the self-love of the judges, for it made them accusers and judicial murderers of the innocent. On the latter, Burroughs cleared his innocence by an earnest speech. Wow, an earnest speech. Now listen to this. Repeating the Lord's Prayer composedly and exactly, and with a fiery of us that astonished, tears flowed to the eyes of many. It seemed as if the spectators would rise up to hinder the execution. So Cotton Mather, on horseback among the crowd, addressed the people, cavillating and at the audition of Burroughs as though he had been no true minister, insisting on his guilt and hinting that the devil could sometimes assume the appearance of an angel of light. And then the hanging proceeded. So this guy, this Cotton Mathers, after he brought the crowd to tears by saying the Lord's Prayer, this guy was so good at speaking, he turned that around and made it seem as though he was the devil. Now, how the heck is that possible? Comment on that, please.
Well, that's clearly a case of yeah, I mean, they twisted his words, they twisted his testimony, and he was obviously an honest man who was trying to not be executed for something he didn't do, and he was only appealing to the New Testament and the teachings of Jesus Christ, which said mercy, love and peace and all that, and instead it was just more barbaric and inhumane treatment. I mean, that's what the whole thing was. It was barbaric and inhumane.
Yeah, and I think it was a spectacle too, because people were coming from all over the place to see these hangings. And here, like they said, it was a novelty in which a minister would be hanged. And all of a sudden
Yeah.
they got this minister that's going to be hanged. This is going to draw a huge crowd. We can't stop now.
Yeah.
People came to see the minister hang.
Yeah, and I'm sure that brought a lot of revenue to the town.
Yeah.
All the fast food vendors of their day.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. I know. This is like having a circus in town several times. Just find some more people, some more witches.
yeah, or the Olympics. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Meantime, the confessions of the witches began to be directed against the Anabaptists. Mary Osgood was dipped by the devil. The court still had work to do. On the 9th, 6 women were condemned, and more convictions followed. Giles Corey, the octogenarian, seeing that
Octogenarian,
I'm
which
glad
means
you're
he
here.
was 80 years old.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what that. Okay, thank you for that. I am so glad you could read my words on this paper, and I can't figure them out. Seeing what that were all convicted, refused to plead, and was condemned to be pressed to death. So this was an 80-year-old man. Oh my God, I just didn't realize that. So this guy you were talking about, Lucky, that was speaking up, he was
Yes.
80 years old and saying,
80.
"Put more rocks on."
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And also the fact that they were persecuting an Anabaptist. I mean, I don't know how much you know about this, but
No,
the
I don't.
Anabaptists were mainly in France, but they were like a subgroup of what they call the Cathars or Cathars, and they rebelled against. They were the first group in continental Europe that rebelled against the authority of the church, the central authority, because they felt they were you'd be hard pressed to even call these people Christians, because they believed in what we would today call Gnosticism, or which basically says that if it's organized, it's evil. If it's got a hierarchical structure, it's bad. And so the Anabaptists, since they were persecuted in Europe, a lot of them fled to the United States, or what became as the United States, and they only to meet up with the same exact treatment. Why? Because they were basically the libertarians of their day. They didn't want anything to do with organized religion per se, but they still wanted to pursue a spiritual life.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Come all that way from England to be here so you could be free. And then they still, like I said, it's California all over and New York all over. I'm leaving New York. I'm going to Florida. But you know what? Wait 10 years. Florida will be just like New York. People will be moving out of there saying this place is crazy.
Yeah.
Might not think it now, but look what'll happen. So he was being pressed to death. The horrid sentence of barbarous usage of English law, never again followed in the colonies, was executed forthwith. So nobody ever again was pressed to death except that guy. On the 22nd of September, 8 persons were led to the gallows. Of these, Samuel Wardwell had confessed and was safe, but from shame and persistence, he retracted his confession, and speaking the truth boldly, he was hanged not for witchcraft, but for denying witchcraft.
Oh.
You just can't get out of it, can you? See, this is what I'm saying. They had an agenda. I mean, it didn't matter if you were for it or against it, or you didn't believe it, or you did believe it. You were getting it. Didn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting that back when I was looking into this, I was looking at the list of names of all the people that were executed, because I remember Alice Cooper, the singer, musician, he had made the claim that he gave himself that name because he felt himself to be the reincarnation of a woman named Alice Cooper who was sentenced for witchcraft. Except that I couldn't find the name Alice Cooper among any of the condemned. So maybe, as I said before, there's a lot of diverse sources of information, some of whom could be true, and some of them are just apocryphal, and some of them are outright false.
It doesn't mean that it could have been that Alice Cooper that was in Salem. It could have been an Alice Cooper that was condemned for witchcraft afterwards. I mean, there was other time. This was not the only time, people, that witchcraft was going, killings were going on in the United States. This is just the big one.
Yeah.
Because it went on for months and months, and they kept hanging and hanging and hanging and hanging, you know. Okay, Martha Corey was, before execution, visited in prison by Paris, the two deacons, and another member of his church. The church recorded tells that self-sustained, she imperiously rebuked her destroyers, and they pronounced the dreadful sentence of excommunication against her. In the calmness with which Mary Eastie exposed the falsehood of those who had selected from her family so many victims, see, victims from her family, that these were all one side of the family. And that's why I said this is a political thing and a land thing, and this divided, I'm divided against you, and this is the way we're going to get those people. So many victims. She joined the noblest fortitude with sweetness of temper, dignity, and resignation. But the chief judge was positive that all had been done rightly, and was very impatient in hearing anything that looked another way. There hang 8 firebrands of hell, said Noyes, the minister of Salem, pointing to the bodies swinging on the gallows. Already 20 persons had been put to death for witchcraft. 55 had been tortured or terrified into persistent confessions. With accusations, confessions increased the confessions and new accusations. Even the generation of the children of God were in danger of falling under the condemnation. The jails were full, and were also observed that no one of the condemned confessing witchcraft had been hanged. So if you confessed, you weren't going to get hanged. But if you
but you
denied
weren't
it,
going to get hanged, but you were you faced like the deprivation of your property.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's it. Yes. So if you,
Confiscation of,
yes, that's the truth. If you confessed you're a witch, you lost your property. So you either lost your property, became desolate, or you became executed. Because even if you confessed of it, your life is over. You have nothing.
yeah.
So this was a political land grab.
Mhm.
That's what it was, because it sounds like it was all about one side of the family or the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. No one that confessions had escaped either hanging or imprisonment for trial. No one on the condemned who asserted innocence, even if one of the witnesses confessed perjury or foreman of the jury acknowledged the error of the verdict, escaped the gallows. Favoritism was shown in listening to accusations which were turned aside from friends or partisans. If a man began a career as a witch hunter and becoming convinced of an imposture, declined the service, and he was accused and hanged. Persons accused who had escaped from the jurisdiction in Massachusetts were not demanded as would have been done in the case of acknowledged crime, so that the magistrates acted as if witch law did not extend beyond their jurisdiction. Witnesses convinced of perjury were cautioned and permitted to still to swear away the lives of others. It was certain people had been tempted to become accusers by promise of favor. And yet the zeal of Stoughton was unabated, and an arbitrary court adjourned to the first Tuesday in November. Between this and then, wrote Brattle, will be the great assembly, and in this manner will be a particular subject of allegation. Our hopes, he adds, are here. The representatives of the people must stay the evil, or New England is undone and undone. Far different from the reasoning Cotton Mather, he was met continually with all sorts of objections and objectors against the work doing at Salem. The obstinate Sadducees, the witch advocates, who esteem the executions by judicial murderers, gained such influence as to embarrass the governor. Oh boy, when you embarrass the governor. But Cotton Mather, still eager to lift up a standard against the infernal enemy, undertook the defiance of his friends, and he sent to Salem for an account of strong enough to knock down one that believed nothing reasonable, promising to box it about among his neighbors till it comes he knows not where it lasts. Before the opening of the adjourned session of the general court, indefatigable man had prepared his narrative of wonders of the invisible world in the design of promoting a pinctious thankfulness to God for the justice being so far executed among us for this book. So he was writing a book. He received.
It's so obvious. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
writing a book
they
about
threw-
the invisible world, the wonders of the invisible world. What greater way to have people killed for being witches and be right at the heart of it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it looks like they threw Law and Order out the window. Like it was totally unhinged. And like you just read, they were using witness testimony from people that had been convicted of lying to the court, that had been convicted of perjury. And keep in mind that, none of these people that were accused had defense attorneys, because I'm pretty sure that if you were an attorney and you said, okay, I'm going to defend one of these people, that you'd be hanged too for
That's right.
defending them.
Yeah, so you don't want to defend anybody who's a witch, who won't
Yeah.
confess. And you if you get convicted or sentenced as a witch, you confess, but otherwise you're going to get hanged. Man, this is just, oh boy. Okay, on the second Wednesday of October, 1692, the nice part about this whole thing is they were people who could read and write, and they wrote all this stuff down. Unlike a lot of things that got,
Swept under the carpet.
Yeah, nobody there to record it. In 1692, about a fortnight after the last hanging of 8 at Salem, the representatives of the people assembled, and the people of Andover, their minister joining with them, appeared with their remonstrate among the doings of the witch tribunals. We know not, say they, who can think himself safe if the accusations of children and others under the diabolical influence shall be received against persons of good fame. Of the discussions that ensued, no record is preserved. We know only the issue. The general court did not place itself in direct opposition to the advocates of the trial as to legislation. It adopted what King William rejected, the English law word for word as it stood in the English statute book, but they abrogated the special court, establishing a tribunal by public law. So these other people came and said, you can't listen to kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing as we saw with the Satanic Panic and with some of these terrorism cases where you're using not only contrived evidence, but you're using paid informants and you're using setups by the government, entrapment. Okay, what if you get a group of disaffected young men and say, okay, we're going to bomb City Hall or whatever, and then set it up to make it look like a real bomb or whatever, and voila, you have a case, even though like most of these terrorism suspects turn out to be innocent.
Yeah, because they just have a handler that's guiding them along. They'd never do it by themselves.
Yeah.
It's like talking big, like, I'm going to go out and do this. And, you'll never really do that. But then some guy knocks at your door. Hey, you want to do that? I'll help you along. I got a car for you out there. And then in the car is this item. And then you go to 32nd Street, knock on the door there, and there's a guy there that'll help you out. Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And in a lot of instances, some of these defendants were retarded, which means, they weren't exactly present of mind. So they just went along with it because they thought that that's what the guy wants. So I'll just do it,
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing the right thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Phillips had instantly on his arrival employed his illegal court in hanging. See, this was a legal court. The representatives of the people delayed the first assembly of the legal colonial court till January of the following year. Thus, an interval of more than 3 months from the last executions gave the public mind, security, and freedom, and through Phillips still conferred the place of chief judge of Stoughton. Yet jurors representing the public mind acted independently when the court met in Salem. 6 women of Andover at once renouncing their confessions treated the witchcraft, but as something so-called the bewildered, but as seemingly afflicted. The memorial of like terror came from the inhabitants of Andover. Of the Prestments, is there a city named Andover near you
Oh, yeah.
down there by
Yes,
Salem?
just Andover is actually where Pfizer is being has a building.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. I was just wondering how anyway,
Andover's about maybe an hour west of Salem,
okay.
maybe 45 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah. So about
that's
60
driving. That's car driving. So
That's 60
by
miles.
horse.
Oh yeah, that's 60 miles. That's a long ways. Okay, the presidents of the grand jury dismissed more than half, and it found bills against 26 of the trials did but show the feebleness of the testimony on which others had been condemned. The same testimony had produced, and there at Salem, with Stoughton on the bench, verdicts of acquittal followed. So they're acquitting all this. Error expired and missed its worshipers. 3 had for special reasons for been convicted, and 1 was a wife whose testimony had sent her husband to the gallows and whose confession was now used against herself. All were at once reprieved and soon set free. Since reluctant to yield, the party of superstitions were resolved on 1 conviction. The victim selected was Sarah Daston, a woman of 80 years old who for 20 years had enjoyed the undisputed reputation of a witch. If ever there were a witch in the world, she, it was said, was one. And in the presence of the throng, the trial went forward at Charleston. There was more evidence against her than any other in Salem, but the common mind was enthralled and asserted itself through the jury by verdict of acquittal. So the lady who might have been the witch of the whole town, she got free.
Yeah. Yeah.
To cover the conclusion, Cotton Mather got up a case of witchcraft in his own parish. Miracles he adverses to were wrought in Boston. Believe his statements, and you must believe that his prayers healed diseases. But he was not bloodthirsty. He wished his vanity protected and not his parishioners hanged. Yeah, right. And his bewitched neophyte, profiting by his cautions, was afflicted by veiled specters. The imposition was promptly exposed to ridicule by something. I don't even know what those words are. Cold from hell and unlettered by the rational and intelligent Robert Cliff. Was Cotton Mather honestly ever ready to dupe himself? He limited his credulity only by the probable credulity of others. He changes or admits to represent his statements without acknowledging error. So he's always right. He's never wrong. And everything he says is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
He is an example of how far selflessness under the form of vanity and ambition can blind the higher facilities, stupefy the judgment, and dupe the consciousness of itself. His self-righteousness was complete till he was reassigned and recalled by Phillips, consequence of impetuous ambiguity. Left the government for some years in the hands of Stoughton, and the press was constrained. When at last the narrative of Cliff appeared, Cotton Mather endeavored to shield himself by calling his adversaries the adversaries of religion, and through hardly 7 or 8 of his ministers, and no magistrate of popular appointment had a share in the guilt. He endeavored, but ineffectually, to denounce the book as a libel upon the whole government and ministry of the land. So he's denying his own book now. Okay, but that it just goes on about him and what became of him, and
See, yeah, I think a lot
that's
of what
about it.
I think a lot of what led up to this was basically English common law gone wild.
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
because see, a lot of people don't know this, but the legal systems of all the countries of Earth can be divided into two systems. The one is the Roman system, and the other one that's used in all the English-speaking countries of the Earth, which is United States, England, Canada, is English common law. And English common law has a thing called jurisprudence, which Roman law does not. And that is specifically that the judiciary can go basically try a law, that they can basically rule on the implementation of a law, which under Roman law you can't. It's basically Roman law states that what's written is what's implemented,
Mhm.
and the function of a high court or whatever is to decide on the specifics of it, not on the intention of the law itself.
Mhm.
Whereas in this case, you had like a fledgling democracy, and instead of like a consensus government, which is what a republic is supposed to be, you had democracy, which is nothing more than mob rule. That's why you had, juries that decided, okay, this person's guilty. People that were not qualified to judge a case on its merits were instantly thrust into the role of determining, like, okay, is this person a witch in the strict sense of the written law or the Bible? So which is it? Which are we going to adhere to? Is it the laws that we have agreed to under either, I don't know, the Mayflower Compact or whatever laws that came after that, or are we going to go by the Bible? And if we have separation of church and state, um, does that mean that the Bible is valid or not valid? What is the legal standing of the Bible?
Hmm. Yeah. And if you're the church and he's the minister, he's going to have to go by the Bible, because otherwise he's
Yeah,
saying the Bible ain't real.
exactly.
So it must be the law. And of
Mhm.
course, he's got everything to gain. I mean, if he's calling out these witches, he's making his ministry grow, because you're either with them or you're with me. And then,
Exactly.
of course, he's writing a book, and how better to I'm calling out witches, buy my book.
Yeah, exactly. And it's exactly like George Bush when he said, "You're either with us or you're with the terrorists."
Yeah.
And which is a reflection of something a different man said in the 1940s, in Germany. He also
Mhm.
said the same thing. You're either with us or you're with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the thing is too, I mean, he proves it there, where the guy says, go out and arrest these people. I can't arrest them. Well, then you're a witch. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, if you are in the town at that point in time and you see this happening, what are you going to be doing? I mean,
see, if I would distance myself as much as I could, I would declare myself to be a Buddhist, or like, I don't have anything to do with this. None of this applies to me. No, no, no. I worship Buddha.
yeah. Well, yeah, but if you're in that community, remember, if you wouldn't go with the church, you weren't a church believer, they would have kicked you out. So you got to choose a side. You're going to be
Mhm.
either the one in this church, you're going to be in that, like Lucky, like you said, there's a church on every corner. You better belong to one of them. Otherwise, you're the witch.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, it gets far worse than that, because I realized that I have a French church this way, an Irish church that way, and Italian church, they're all Catholic. You get a
Yeah.
French
Yeah.
Catholic, you get an Italian Catholic, you get an Irish Catholic. It's just, yeah, they're all Catholic, but they're all need their own churches because, but why? I mean, some of them, one of them actually tried to close down because they didn't have enough parishioners, but the people staged a sit-in to it. So they ended up keeping it. So the Irish church is now, the priest of the Irish church is also doing the ceremony for the French church, which is across the street.
Mm-hmm.
These crazy things. And this is how we live. Oh no, we can't worship in the Irish church. No.
No, yeah, we're Irish. We got to go to the Irish church.
Yes.
Whatever happened to et pluribus unum, out of many one? Whatever happened to nationality American? Where you were supposed to, theoretically lose your nationality when you became an American citizen, and left all the old stuff behind in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently they hadn't figured that out in the colonies yet. Remember, it said in there they were still under the crown and they were proud of it.
Yeah.
So and that's the thing. I think a lot of them were probably still proud to be under the crown because their mothers or fathers or grandfathers were that. And you know, if you were born in Boston, say for instance, and your parents came from England or wherever, or Germany, they're going to be instilled into you as that's your nationality, not America.
Well, see, while this is true, they didn't usually send members of the upper class over into the colonies, because you have to conceive of it. You have to understand that every single one of the 13 colonies was originally a corporation. It was basically a corporation founded by the king or queen, the king of England, to make money by extracting natural resources and shipping them over to England, where they would use their manufacturing capabilities to manufacture products. And that's how the early trade, what the early trade consisted of: raw materials coming from the United States, going into England to be manufactured, and stuff that they sold back in the colonies.
Yep. Exactly.
That's why they didn't effectively have such a high tax rate, because they were operated as British territory. So, you know, when the Stamp Act came around, you know, it was kind of a big deal, because they weren't used to paying, you know, an excise tax on any product. So, and it was viewed as an imposition and as the start of just a series of more and more new taxes. And guess what? They were right.
Yeah. They can only see what America's come to now, they'd be like, you pay all those taxes? Holy cow.
Yeah, because back then the Stamp Act, you know, for which they held like the whole Boston Tea Party and everything, that was nothing. I forget how much it was, but it was like 1.5%.
Yeah, it was like 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just is pennies on the dollar compared to, you know, can you imagine, you know, all the taxes you pay. By the time you pay all your taxes out of your paycheck, and then you go to the store and you buy stuff, you pay taxes on that, and you pay taxes on the gas, you pay taxes on your houses, and
it's bad enough that you're taxed on not only your income, but you're taxed on your expenditures, your spending, and you're taxed on your property as well, your assets, which means that there's no escaping any of these taxes, because unlike a corporation that's only taxed on its profits, you as an individual are taxed on your revenues, which means your entire income without being able to deduct any of your actual labor incurred. Which means, I'll give you an example. If I negotiate with you that I'm going to work for you for $10 an hour, that means that my labor is worth $10. I'm just trading $10 worth of my labor for your $10 in the form of a piece of paper that says $10 on it.
That's
Therefore,
right.
my profit is zero, and I shouldn't be paying any tax.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
And to make matters worse, because the governments of the world have been taken over by the corporations of the world, they've effectively been made artificial persons, which means, you know, that they have all the rights of a person without being an actual person, in addition to the fact that they're only taxed on a small portion of their actual income, their net profits or retained earnings of the corporation. They're also not taxed. They don't have to pay a value-added tax or a VAT like we do in Europe. So, you know, you would expect that the counterpoint to that would be not corporate personhood, but personal corporatehood, with more people forming personal corporations and using those as an alias to contract for things like employment, where you would only be paying taxes on your actual net income instead of your gross income.
Yeah, and that's where it should be, but it's not. You take it
No.
off the whole.
No, and see, some people have brought up the fact that, you know, America was much better as a Christian theocracy, and, you know, here you see a perfect example of why that was not the case. And it wasn't the only abuse of theocratic power that you saw in the United States. It was the whole English nobility thing, because like I mentioned before, not only did you have to be a member of the Church of England in England, but you also had to pay a church tax. And based on how much church tax you paid is how close to the altar you could sit. So you would basically pay like a reservation fee for the seat that you and or your family would sit in. And sometimes you would even have your name engraved there. Wow. So it became almost like another hierarchy inside of a hierarchy, which consisted of,
Well, the church learned how to charge for everything. I mean, when you die, say you're married and you die, your wife would pay a fee so that the priest could talk to God to send you to heaven.
Yeah.
And they had those, and I'm thinking, what? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I mean, get you right after life itself is over.
Yeah, exactly. And not just that, but they pay an annual fee for like keeping your headstone up at the Catholic cemetery, so that's more money. And if you're a prestigious family, you want to keep that gravestone and you want to be as big as prestigious as possible. So that also meant more money, and also another system of hierarchy, or as I call it, celebrocracy these days.
And that's why they control everything.
Yeah.
Now the control is probably morphed off into other things. I don't know, maybe, Lucky, what does it look like in your city there? Now that's where it's all started from. And as you said that, and Joe Sapien said too, the same thing, is that Pfizer's in your city. Did they morph into Pfizer? Is that why Pfizer is in there? Because it's controlling religious faction?
Pfizer bought the facility in Andover, was bought by Pfizer. Pfizer is from Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah, but they do manufacture the thing there. In the facility. But that's all because Moderna, which was in Cambridge, which is in Boston, they manufactured the other cookie.
Potion.
The other potion is being, so the two companies that are manufacturing the potions are very close together.
But isn't that something? I mean, not that they're in that little town of Salem, but I mean they're in that general vicinity, of a square mileage kind of thing. The two biggest ones that are manufacturing potions that are pharmaceutical, which boils down to witchcraft.
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
what's the coincidence?
Don't forget that the New Testament was written entirely in Septuagint Greek, and the word in Greek for sorcery is actually pharmakia.
Yeah, pharmakia.
Which is what pharmacy is based on.
Yeah.
In other words, it is witchcraft. It's the modern thing, and Boston and Massachusetts was the center point for all those major changes. Because don't forget, you had not only the Boston Tea Party, but you also had the Boston Massacre.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but
triggered.
Exactly, it triggered everything. But see, that's the semblance. You got these two huge corporations.
Yeah.
In that area,
actually,
for witchcraft.
Moderna is not a huge company. Moderna has one pharmaceutical, one. And if this one pharmaceutical loses popularity, it's gone. On the other hand, Pfizer also likes to sell that thing. So if Moderna goes down, they'll become a monopoly and they can't so they have to keep infusing so to keep both. If you look into the backstory, yes, you're right.
But I'm just saying, it's why did they settle there? They could have went, another state, anywhere else, but they have to be, that's what I'm saying. It's like, what attracts that kind of stuff to that spot?
There's so much. Fauci has a finger in it. Besides that, why would Fauci? Yeah, Fauci was one of the was the beginning people of Moderna.
Yes.
And what Pfizer has was also something from Moderna. So there's a lot of nepotism in the whole thing. So
also,
why is it here? Why is it here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't forget that even in the founding documents for Moderna, the name Moderna is derived from modified eRNA.
Oh yeah.
Modified RNA.
Yes, actually, in the beginning, because I was going to work for Moderna well in the beginning when they didn't have a vaccine, they didn't have anything, they didn't have a product, and their idea was to manufacture RNA. It was a fantastic idea. Was to use it to boost up people's immune system to fight cancer. Well, none of their ideas went to fruition. And the one thing that did is the
Mhm.
cookie that we have right now.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
honestly, they had, when I was going to work there, they had some big plans for cancer and all of it went away.
Wow.
So
Mhm.
so whatever they were doing with clinical trials didn't pan out very well. And somehow the potion did.
Hmm.
I'm being
Well,
very
it's
careful because
not
I don't
in.
want, I don't want any
Yeah.
of my words to be used against you.
But
Yeah.
here's
Well,
the thing with Fauci. You said Fauci, and he had a whole doing with the thing. Wouldn't that make him like the grand master wizard of the whole?
Oh, absolutely.
He would
Fauci
be
is,
the grand master, you know?
I mean, he bears a striking resemblance to Pope Pius XII.
Oh,
And Pope
absolutely.
Pius XII is the guy who blessed the weapons of the Germans during the Second World War.
Wow. I gotta look this up. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Pope Pius XII.
The place in China where the beginning of the pandemic happened was, this is known, Fauci put money into, which was
Oh, yeah.
actually illegal.
Yeah.
But the way he did it was just a little bit off. So he can, it was deniability,
Yeah, because he gave the money to a different guy who gave the money over there.
Exactly. He did it too. And he lied to Congress. This guy should not be in his position.
There
Yeah,
you
okay.
go. There he does look like him, doesn't he?
Yes.
Oh my
Totally.
goodness.
Totally.
He
So-
does. And look at the side view. That looks like him. Oh my goodness.
Uh-huh.
What a small world. I
Uh-huh.
had to share that. I'm
And
sorry,
plus, even
people.
the name sounds like Faust.
Yeah.
Dr.
Yeah.
Faust, who sold his soul to the devil so he could have power.
Mhm.
He's got
Yeah.
power.
And
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. If he's over the, and then, what a concept. I mean, it's right staring us in the face the whole time, and we can't see it. How
Well,
is
don't
that?
forget that it's not in any of these companies' interest to wipe out any real disease like cancer because they
Yeah.
make too much money off of it.
Yeah.
They're not. Also notice that if you read the literature of any of these companies, they never call them cures. They're only called treatments.
Mhm.
They make money off cancer. That's why 25% of all the vaccines that were given to people in the 60s and 70s, where I was born in the 60s, so I got all those, and they contained SV40, and SV40 is an agent that they give to mice to give them cancer. And it's been proven that these actually cause 25% of the recipients to develop cancer. So,
Yeah.
and then they said, oh, well, it was there, as a byproduct. We didn't mean to put it there. Well,
Too
yeah.
bad. You gave it to everybody anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if I would have known all that stuff, I wouldn't want to take those. Remember when I was a kid and they're telling you, you got to take your shots, get your shots. They'd line you up in school and you would go in there and get them.
Last shot I had was for tetanus, and that was 2004, and I had a serious ab reaction to it, which still continues to this day, since 2004. So that's what, 17 years later. And, ever since then, I wouldn't take anything like that, anything. And I do my research, do my due diligence in case somebody else is taking some kind of substance or potion. I'm always like, no, this has this and this as a side effect. You don't want to take that. And I think the best thing you can do is natural remedies and natural cures.
Yeah. Stay healthy. And there,
boost your immune system, because Pfizer has something like 800 lobbyists in Congress right now. Moderna has like 200, but natural immunity doesn't have any lobbyists.
True.
That's I agree with that one. Wow. Yeah, and it's all potions and notions of whatever, and nobody really, there's nobody actually taking this stuff saying, what's in it? I don't know. Just give it to me. It's good for you.
Yeah, exactly. Just take it, because if you don't, then you're not patriotic. Then you're with the terrorists. So
Yeah, like that one guy said recently, that's why God gave you two arms, one for the one and one for the other shot, you know. It's like, what the fuck? You know, because flu
I
season's
remember that.
coming up, you know. And I'm thinking, what? Where do these guys get that stuff? I mean, do they think we're really that stupid? Well, I guess so. People
Well,
are doing it.
Yeah, look at it this way. You know, in the Middle Ages, cancer, you know, cancer's been around since day one, except that it was always a very rare disease, you know, extremely rare.
Yeah.
And it was treated with various potions, you know, back in the day. And one of them was willow bark. And what is willow bark? If you make a tea out of
Aspirin.
willow bark, that's aspirin.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a natural remedy, one of the natural remedies. So but the fact that it's exploded to the point where you have people catching it left and right, where like 25% of all deaths or even more are cancer, and the other is like heart disease, it's ridiculous. I mean,
yeah,
and
that's not normal. It's not normal.
It isn't, and it's also not normal. Like back when I was a young man, you'd hear of people getting cancer, and you know, usually they would last maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 years with cancer, and it's still getting by. Nowadays, they get cancer 3.5 months later, they're dead.
Yep.
It's like my brother. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say, didn't
what's
you
up
have a
with
brother
that?
that died of cancer or something?
3.5 months after he was diagnosed.
Wow.
Yeah.
And yeah, cancer is
And
not a
he
good
he
thing.
didn't go for chemotherapy, he went for immunotherapy, which is just another brand of chemotherapy, basically. And you know, he was diagnosed with kidney cancer, and 3.5 months later, he was dead.
Wow.
So, you know, as to how he got that, well, many theories abound. One of which being the fact that where he had his office set up, he had a bank of 6 smart meters directly behind his back.
Oh, geez. That's not good.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, and since then, you know, I've been very cognizant of these waves or whatever, and avoiding them as much as possible. Got myself a little, you know, tri-field
Oh,
meter.
yeah. I got one of
Yeah.
those. I should use it more.
Yeah. And I've taken steps to shield where I sleep, you know, from any of these ways where I sit. That's why I keep any wireless devices off, and or I've shielded them from myself, where they're only communicating with the router downstairs. That's it. So
Yeah, I had Max Vision on, and he is oh, what was it? I want to say allergic, but he gets affected by the waves
I know.
a lot. And
Yeah, he's very hip to that. Yeah.
yeah, his hat's got stuff inside, and he's got the thing he showed on the show. He's got a battery hooked to a thing on his sock, you know, to help him out. He's got all kinds of, you know, lots of stuff to help him out, and I don't blame him. He wears shirts with the silver stitching in and stuff like that. So, you know,
Yeah, I've spoken to him. Yeah, I know.
Oh, yeah, well, then you know all about it. But yeah, it was very interesting, and I think a lot of us ain't cognizant of it, and you know, it affects us, but we just don't realize it. You know, maybe
exactly, just like the people back in the Salem Witch Trials didn't know what was causing it. So they, you know, except that nowadays science has progressed to the point where they know about all these diseases. They know what causes them, but they're not interested in actually curing them. They're interested in misusing these diseases for their own profit, just like they did back then. I mean, the story is still the same.
Well, you know, that's the thing. Like, Lucky, you've probably seen trials. You were talking about the trials with cancer and stuff like that. Now, the question is if they had a trial, and you think they would honestly tell us if they did the trial and it cured all the cancer, would they promote that or end it? Or would they keep say, well, that cured everybody? Now what do we do?
You know what? I was actually working for a company that was working on non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They had a 98% effectively rate.
Yeah.
But then they were a small company, and FDA came back and says, hey, yeah, we need you to go back and redo second stage clinical trials. At which point they've been going so long that we can't afford that. And the FDA says, in order for it to go to the next stage for our patients, we need to do this. And company shut down.
Wow. 98%.
98% effective rate.
Wow.
That was it. It was using the patient's own, basically, we would ship the patient's cancer cells.
Yeah.
And we would attach the proteins from those cancer cells to mouse cells,
Mhm.
and another thing. And so you inject the patient's own cancer cells into it, so that basically the body would treat the cancer at the molecular level. So when when the cancer came back, would come back in
Yeah.
small packets, and it taught the immune system to fight it at that way, and it worked.
Mm.
The company couldn't afford to run because the
Mhm.
FDA kept asking for more and more research. So yes,
So
the-
so then the
hypothetically, yes.
yeah.
If you have a cure, they're not really interested in it.
Yeah, exactly. And is the FDA saying that because they're making money from these places too? They know that if you put out a cure, then all the other companies, because who's running the FDA?
It's the drug companies.
That's
com-
right. Yeah,
That's where the money comes from. Yeah.
exactly. So if these guys are making money on a half-assed cure, they're going to put a lot of money into getting the real cure gone and shut that stuff down.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
the thing was that they were talking about that once they get non-Hodgkin's lymphoma done, they were going to go after other cancers and
Well, yeah, it makes sense. You could cure all the cancer. But
All you
now it's
needed
shut
was
down. And
yep. All you needed was fortunately you needed tumor. Once you get the tumor cell, they had you treat the patient. It was patient specific vaccine. It was
Mhm.
fantastic, and
wow,
no, it went nowhere.
nowhere. Well, with that said, we're going somewhere, which means we're gonna call it a night after 2 hours. Holy cow! But this
Yeah.
has been one of the most interesting shows I think I've ever done. It was really
Yeah.
good. I thank you guys for coming with this show tonight, because our travels have been far into the past and right up into the future, both ways.
Mhm.
So thank you both for coming on tonight. And everybody who's managed to stay the whole show in the chat room, thank you all. Everybody from Isby, Truth Seeker 2, Elderberry, Joe Sapien, Big Al. Go out and buy Big Al's cards. He's got them at the printers, and they're ready and ripe to go, because I know I got 2 packages ordered already.
I got 2
Susie
myself.
Q. Yes, exactly. Susie Q's in the house. Thank you for coming. Pa Joe, I know I missed some people, but thank you all. Mary wins, we all win. Thank you much. Okay, and with that, I bid you adieu. Remember, be the frequency you want to receive. I love you all, everybody. Peace, everybody. There we go. Yay! Woo!